Hi, this is Joe Chambers. Welcome to Musicians Hall of Fame Backstage. Today is part 2 of the great James Burton. When we come back, James Burton.
Frank Page said, Horace, you need to go out and tell the folks something because, I mean, they're going to tear this place down. And so Horace walked out there and he walked up to the mic and he said, ladies and gentlemen, Elvis has left the building.
And then they started doing it from then on?
Well, yeah, we had a guy that would go out with us. He was like he kind of reminded me of an old circus guy, kind of like Colonel Parker, you know. But he would go out and after every show he'd walk up to Mike and say, ladies and gentlemen, Elvis has left the building.
Speaking of the Colonel, what was your take on Colonel Parker?
You know, I didn't really have any problems with Colonel, you know, everything was good. Of course, I didn't have to answer to the Colonel. I didn't work for the Colonel, I worked for Elvis. So, but Colonel was nice to me. I didn't have a problem.
So, I hate to bring up something like this, but, you know, you were in the band when Elvis passed. What happened? What was that like for you?
Well,
what was it like for the band?
August 16th, and I lived in Toluca Lake in Burbank, California, and I went to Burbank to get on we had a private plane, and we flew to Las Vegas and picked up our conductor, Joe Gershow, and singers and musicians. And so anyway, when we left Las Vegas that morning, we were flying out to, our first show was in Portland, Maine. And man, I don't know, we were in the air maybe 15, 20, 30 minutes. And you know, you can get quite a ways down the road, down the air in a plane, you know. So they called from Vegas and said, return to Vegas, the pilot, but they didn't tell him why. So anyway, the pilot said, well, I have to stop and refuel because I can't just turn around and go back. So we stopped in Pueblo, Colorado to refuel. And so I got out, and I walked outside the plane, and the trombone player, Marty Harrell, Marty came up to me and said, James, I'm going to go call Vegas and see if I can get find out something. I said, oh, okay. So my wife was in Louisiana. I called, I was going to go call her, and I didn't make it to the phone. Marty was on his way back. And he came up to me, and he had tears in his eyes, and he put his arms around me and said, Elvis died. I couldn't believe it, man. It was like shock, you know. I couldn't believe it. I said, is this a joke? He said, no, for real. And because the thing that came to mind was Vernon. His dad had been sick with the heart problems. And I thought maybe something happened to Vernon. But it was, this particular time, it was Elvis. I mean, it was a sad flight back to Vegas. We get back to Vegas, and I had a home in Vegas, and I was going to get off and stay there, knowing my wife was in Louisiana. I said, no, I'm going to go back to my home in Toluca Lake in Burbank. And Jimmy Wakely, a good friend of mine, the cowboy, Jimmy, picked me up at the airport, and it was raining. It was really a sad day. And he took me to my house, and he said, James, I want you to come spend the night with me and Inez, his wife. I said, man, I don't know. I really need to get on the phone. I want to see if I can get a flight to Memphis. I got on the phone. Joe, I called every airline I could think of, and they were completely booked up. I talked to a girl with American Airlines, and she knew me. Because she was a big fan of Elvis. She said, James, I got 500 people on waiting list, but give me an hour or two and let me see what I can do. So she called me back later and she said, you got an 11 o'clock flight tomorrow morning and don't be late. And I went and got on that plane, flew to Memphis, and it was a very sad thing, you know. I walked in the house, and I called my wife and I said, "Meet me in Memphis," and so she did. Later, I picked her up later at the airport, and Priscilla wanted to take me in that room where they had Elvis in the casket, and I didn't want to do it. I said, "I'm gonna wait till my wife gets here." And Ann Margaret was there. Ann was in the room with Elvis, and she would go in for maybe 3 or 4 hours and then come out and go back in.
That long in there with it, with golly.
Yeah, James Brown, man, he was in there for hours. He I don't know, I think they had to pull him out. He didn't want to leave. And Ann Margaret was in there a long time. And yeah, it was just, God, again, all the people driving down the funeral concession, going to the graveyard. The streets were just lined up with thousands and thousands of people. Just amazing. It was sad. You know, my wife and I we were in like the third, I believe, third or fourth white limo following the hearse to the, and J.D. Sumner and the Stamps, they were all there. And it was a sad day.
Well, I'm going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about something a lot more happy.
The Musicians Hall of Fame and Museum has been celebrating the men and women who make the music of our lives since 2006. The Musicians Hall of Fame is the one and only museum in the world that honors the talented musicians who played on the greatest recordings of all time.
It's a music city, huh? It's, I mean, where else are you going to get the cats, all the cats that are in this room?
The Grammy Museum Gallery at the Musicians Hall of Fame is an interactive facility that allows guests to explore the process of making a recording. Take drum lessons with Ringo Starr. Sing on stage with Ray Charles. Write a song with Desmond Child. Rap with Nelly. Or be Garth Brooks in our recording studio experience. Located in the heart of downtown Nashville, in the first floor of the historic Nashville Municipal Auditorium. Come see what you've heard at the Musicians Hall of Fame and Museum. Dream Events and Catering is Nashville's leading full-service event and catering company. Grounded in exceptional customer service, creative expertise, and dreaming big, we imagine your next event as memorable, meaningful, and delicious.
Welcome back to Musicians Hall of Fame Backstage with James Burton. So, Ricky Nelson, would you tell the story of how you guys met?
Well, I was working with the great country singer Bob Luman, and we were working on a song, My Gal is Red Hot. And, Ricky was on Imperial Records and Bob was on Imperial Records. So we were actually in Hollywood rehearsing at Lou Chudd's office, the owner of Imperial Records. And the music director, Jimmy Haskell, was working on the TV show with Ozzy and the recording sessions with Ricky and everything. So anyway, we were rehearsing this song, My Gal is Red Hot, and it was pretty cool. And so Ricky came in on business, and he wanted to know who was playing in the next room. So Jimmy Haskell brought him in, and he listened for about 3 hours. We were playing all kinds of stuff, having fun. And the next day, we had a telegram. We had a home it was in Canoga Park in the Valley in California. And we had a telegram on the door. And James Kirkland went out to get the newspaper that morning, and he found the telegram. And Ricky invited James Kirkland, the bass player, and I down to the studio, General Service Studios, and to meet his dad and the family, Ozzy and Eric. So anyway, Ozzy came in, and we had our instruments with us. And Ricky said, "You think we could do a song for Dad?" Yeah, sure, why not? And Ozzy said, "Yeah, do a song for me." So we did a couple of Elvis songs like Mystery Train, and just kind of mixed it up a little bit. And Ozzy said, "Wow, this is great. Do you boys want to do a song on a TV show. And that was our first introduction to the Ozzie and Harriet show. But that was actually before I joined him as his lead guitar player. So we did a few shows, and James Kirkland and I, we got homesick and wanted to go home. This was during Christmas time. But Ozzie said, man, I'm going to keep the crew on. I've never done this before. I want to keep the crew, and I'll pay you guys triple. Stay and let's do some more stuff for the TV show. And we said, no, we're homesick. We're going home. So James Kirkland and I went back to Louisiana. I was home maybe 2 weeks, and I get a call from Ozzie to join Ricky as his lead guitar player. And he said, I'll send you a telegram. If you accept, just sign the telegram, send it back to me. Hey, 16 years old. Why not?
And so what happened then?
Well, Ricky called me on the phone and said, can you come out tomorrow? I said, well, no, I'm not quite ready. But you know, anyway, we worked it out when I could go out. And Mother didn't want me to leave, of course. You know, I was 16 years old, and she didn't want me to go to California. But I figured it's a great opportunity. I'd love it. I want to go for it. I want to try it. So I went out, and Ricky picked me up at the airport. So we go, they had an apartment for me. We go to my apartment and put everything in the apartment. And Ricky said, Mom and Dad wanted to invite us to dinner tonight. Is it okay? You mind doing it? And I said, sure, that's okay. So we went to the Ozzie and Harriet family, the real house where they live, you know. And so anyway, we're sitting in this beautiful living room area with our trays, and the food comes through the trays. And Harriet said, James, I cooked one of my favorite chicken dishes. I would like to know how you guys eat chicken in Louisiana. She said, out here we just pick it up and eat it, you know. And I said, well, we do pretty much the same thing in Louisiana. But it was very interesting. And after Ozzie finished his dinner, he said, he got up and excused himself. He said, James, I'm going to go up and work on the script for the show tomorrow, but Harriet and I and the boys would love to have you stay in our home, and you and Ricky can work on your music, and you have your own room, you have everything, you know, and you'll be the third boy in our family. I said, well, sure, that's great. I loved it. It was great. And Harriet would cook my breakfast every morning, put it in a special oven that kept the temperature just perfect. And when I'd get up maybe 4 or 5 hours later, my breakfast was ready. But you know, and Ricky would, or someone would come pick me up if the cars were all gone or something. He said, you know, go out, and if there's a car there, get in and come over to the studios.
What a life for a kid, man.
It was wonderful, you know. And Ricky and I, we were sneaking out at night, and Ricky'd always forget his house key, and you have to climb up to the second floor, a window, and go in. But I just said, now, Rick, don't stay out too late tonight. You got an early call tomorrow morning for the TV show. But that was fun, Joe, doing the TV show, really interesting. And
did they compensate you well for that?
Yeah, it was fine. You know, it was, well, you know, I got paid by the week, very weekly, but no. No, it was, hey, for 16 years old, man, it's a lot better than having that paper route. You're throwing papers, you know.
No kidding, yeah.
But they were great, the whole family, and having fun. Rick and I working on songs. I remember Sharon Shealy knocking on the door 20 times a day. Oh, Ricky, you got to do this song. You got to do this song. Well, it was a song called Poor Little Fool.
Oh.
And an interesting story. And Ricky turned it down 10 times. She kept knocking on the door. This one time she came and she was standing there crying. Ricky, it's a hit song for you. You've got to do it. Well, P.J. Proby, Jet Powers back then, he had so many names, P.J. Proby now. But P.J. could sing like Elvis, and he would do the demos. They would cut demos and send them back to Elvis. So anyway, the demo was up-tempo, you know, and everything. If you heard the demo and the song the way we did it, two different songs. So we took I told Ricky, take the song and let's work on it and fool with it. See what can come. We completely rewrote the song, changed it all around. And so anyway, we went in the studio, recorded it, Poor Little Fool, and pretty interesting. So when Sharon Shealy heard it, she came on and said, I love it, I love it. It's different, but I love it. And Ricky, she said, I will split writers with you. Ricky said, no, I don't want writers.
Well, that was cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, if you hear the demo and the way we rewrote it and recorded it was day and night.
Well, you know, that happens a lot. You know, as a writer, I know that I was privy to having a decent song come out really great because of the players, you know, and the producer, you know, so that happens, you know. So how long did that last with...
With Ricky, I was with Ricky maybe 8.5, 9 years. Actually, the way I had sort of made an exit from Ricky, and it was not really, I was not looking for an exit, but Johnny Cash called me to do a TV show, and I wanted to do it. He said, I want you to play slide dobro. And I said, sure, I'd love to do it. But Ricky said no. Ricky didn't want me to do it.
Was that the Johnny Cash show that was filmed here?
No, this was the Johnny Cash doing a TV show in L.A., ABC. And you're going to be shocked when you find out what it is. Anyway, I worked it out with Ozzy and the manager. And we went in and did the show. And Johnny came in the studio, brought me a 1945 National Dobro, dragging it on concrete. I said, Johnny, you can't do that. But anyway, we did this show, and that TV show was Shindig.
No kidding.
1964. And Jack Good, the producer, Jack said, oh man, I'm a huge fan. I love all those solos on Ricky Nelson records. And I said, well, thank you, man. He said, I want you to be on the show every week. Well, not knowing what was going to happen on the Ricky thing, you know. I said, well, what do we do? And Jack said, hey, let's put a band together. So Glenn Harden and I worked together a lot, and also Delaney Bramlett. Delaney was a bass player and singer, and the rhythm guitar player was Joey Cooper, and the drummer was Chuck Blackwell, a friend of Leon Russell's. So we were the Shin Dogs, and
yeah.
So we cut 90% of the songs on the show.
Really, I think that you with Ricky are credited for creating the first music video. Is that not true?
That would be a Traveling Man.
Yeah.
Ricky, you know, was a great artist, and Traveling Man was a top-notch record. And when they put their little video segment together,
yeah,
all the different scenes, you know, it was a good record.
So I guess that's going to maybe go down as the first music video then.
That was it. Yeah. I didn't know till later, but someone told me, yeah, that was the very first. And that's I guess it would that be more history, I guess.
But also on the Ricky Nelson show, the bass player was your buddy Joe Osborne, correct?
I hired Joe in 1959. Ricky and I had a tour to Australia, and we were sitting in a commissary having a hamburger, Coke, and a chocolate malt, Rick's favorite meal. And we're sitting there, and at the same time, we look at each other and say, man, we got a tour in 2 weeks, and we don't even have a bass player. So I said, let me make a phone call real quick. So I called Joe in Shreveport, Louisiana.
Yeah.
I called Joe, and I said, Joe, I'm sitting here with Ricky Nelson, and we sure would like to have you think about playing bass with us on a little tour coming up? And he said, well, yeah, I'd like that. So I put him on the phone with Ricky, and we put it together.
He was already a bass player?
No. Well, he was then, yeah. Joe was a guitar player when I met him, but he couldn't get work for some reason. All the guitar players, me and Billy Sanford and maybe a couple other guys, we had all the work sewed up in Shreveport, which wasn't very much work. But Joe couldn't get a job playing guitar, so he switched over to bass. Man, all of a sudden, he's working with everybody.
I guess that's why he played with a pick, because he was a guitar player first.
And that's how, yeah, with a pick, yeah.
And so here's a question I'd like to know, because we have his bass here.
Right.
We bought it from Joe. That was on all those records. I mean, he didn't change the strings on that bass. That was the one, for 14 years.
No, he would send a message out. If any bass players are throwing their old strings away, here's my address. Send them to me.
Well, they said that he got Leland Sklar's some old strings from Leland, but he said once his original strings just finally would not tune up anymore, the other strings just never had the same sound.
Yeah, they stretch out so much, they lose.
But he had, those strings getting dead over time on all those hit records, from the Carpenters through the Bahamas and Papas and all that. He said he changed them one time on a Carpenter session, and the first note he hit, Richard Carpenter hit the top back and said, put the album back on.
Joe and I were at Al Case's music store that night. We were going in to do a session, and Joe put a new set of strings on his bass. We got to the session, and boy, he hated it. And he called Al. He said, don't close. I'm coming back to get my old string.
No kidding. I'd say
really, a true story. I was cool. There. Yeah.
Well, that was it. Yeah. So how did he get that guitar? Were you there when Mr. Fender? I understood Mr. Fender came by and gave it to him on the set of the Ozzy and Harriet show. Is that true?
Yeah, the jazz bass.
The jazz bass, yeah. Before it ever hit the catalog.
They brought in the Precisions. By the way, I've got a brand new 58 Precision, and everybody in the world wants it. Even Joe wanted it. But I said, I'm going to hang on to it. Brand new 58. But Joe he liked the neck on the jazz bass, and it was the sound was amazing.
Do you know how he acquired it? How?
Well, I've been with Fender for, I guess since 1955, Leo, and I know, and I can't remember if Joe and I went to Fender and he picked one out, or if they brought it to him. I can't remember exactly.
I thought he said that Leo came by the set and gave him that guitar before they were ever even in the catalog.
Well, it wouldn't have been Leo, because Leo never left his office in Fullerton. He was always down there experimenting with stuff. But there's a possibility that one of his guys that would have came by.
Artist promotion people, yeah. Because they did that a lot. They did that with...
Leo gave away so many guitars.
Well, there's the movies. That was brilliant. Because they're still advertising Fender in movies that were made in the 50s and 60s.
Yeah. Well, Joe, that Jimmy Bryant, a great guitar player, Jimmy would help Leo. Leo would build something, take it to a club where Jimmy was playing, and ask him if he'd try it out, So Jimmy Bryant was like the first guy to play the telly. I was the second.
I just found an interview that I did with Bill Carson. Did you know Bill?
Yes, very well.
So we're going to put that out on our little side the Vault series show that we do. But Bill tells the story of working with Leo, and he wanted Leo to make him a guitar. And he tells the story of how he sawed the telly side and the back to make the contour and all that. And he told me that there was 2 or 3 players in L.A. that Leo, since Leo didn't play, had to depend on players to tell him what they needed or what was right or wrong on it. And he was one of them.
I know. Well, Leo would call me and ask me different things about it. And when I As a matter of fact, when I was working in Vegas with Elvis in '69,
Yeah.
there was a guy named Horace White that worked for Leo.
Right.
Horace White came to me after the show that night, and he said, "James, I'm Horace White. I work for Fender Guitar, and I noticed your guitar could use a paint job. So you bring that." He gave me his card and said, "Bring that guitar to me, and I'll any color you want." And I did. And I remember going to Fender, and while I'm talking to Forrest, and I think Leo was there, the guy was taking my guitar apart, and I said, "Hold it. Do you have a little bag here? Take all my hardware off. I'm taking it home with me." You know, because I didn't want anything changed on my guitar.
Right.
So I took everything, and when the guitar was painted and ready, I went down and we put the hardware back in it.
I mean, you played with John Denver. How did that come about?
Well, you know, before Elvis died, I had a call to do a TV show, John Denver, and he had a couple of artists on the show like Johnny Cash. He had Glenn Campbell, Roger Miller, Mary Kay Place, and it was a big show. And he said, "I sure would like for you to go to Australia with me on this tour I got coming up, and I'd like for you to do an album with me." So I said, "Well, if Elvis is, you know, if we're not on tour with Elvis, I'd love to do it." Anyway, very shortly, not even 2 months, Elvis passed away. And of course, when I got back from the funeral, my phone, I had 35 messages on my phone. It was crazy. Waylon Jennings, Merle Haggard, all these calls of people calling to pay their condolences about Elvis. And anyway, John had about 15 messages from John. A few days later, they didn't wait for me to call them. They called me back and said, "I'm going in the studio, RCA, to do the album." That first album I played on was "I Wanna Live." I Wanna Live. And I got to tell you, it kind of touched home, you know, and when it was a great album. And, you know, Jerry Weintraub was going to go on tour with us with Elvis. And he paid Colonel Parker $1 million to go on that tour. That, you know, it was actually, you know, when Elvis died, August 16th. And the show, but that tour that was booked, you're not going to believe this, but when I went to work with John, the very first tour that Jerry Weintraub booked John on was that same tour that Elvis was booked on, opening show in Portland, Maine, and then on and on. But that was supposed to have been the Elvis tour. Jerry was going to take Elvis to Europe. Elvis had never played out of the country except for Canada. So that was what Jerry Weintraub was putting together. I have the schedule that was booked for Elvis, and when we did the John Denver tour, the same schedule.
Same schedule, yeah. James, thank you so much for doing this, and maybe we'll do another one in another 15 years.
Joe, we will. Thank you, man. God bless you.
Thanks again, and thanks for watching Musicians Hall of Fame Backstage.